If you're ready to make money with your podcast, sponsorships are a great way to do that, especially if you have a lot of downloads. Not everyone is going to be able to use sponsorships, but it is something that I get asked a lot about. So I wanted to make sure that I broke this down for you today. We're going to talk through how to find and secure some sponsorships that align with your podcast and your audience. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I'm your host, Alicia Galati. I'm the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating podcasts. Today's question is, how do I find and secure sponsors for my podcast? This is a question that I get a lot, especially from clients. And it's something that I actually do not recommend that a lot of podcasters go this route unless you have a lot of downloads. And to kind of give you a gauge real quick, you're looking at 10,000 downloads per month at least. Once you hit that mark, you're able to easily reach out to sponsorships. That is not to say that with less than that, you can never reach out to sponsorships. I would recommend if you have 5,000 downloads per month that you should start considering it if it is an option and if it's something that really makes sense for your audience. I remember when I first started listening to podcasts back in 2015, which is wild to say, but when I first started listening to podcasts, and a lot of the podcasts that I listened to had very short, quick ads. There actually weren't a lot of ads. Most of the podcasts I listened to were business related, and the ads were either for the business owner's topics or products, and then the other ones were maybe for an email subscription provider, an email service provider, or something like that. There weren't a lot of them. That kind of shifted in, I want to say 2018, when a lot of podcasts, especially true crime podcasts, came out and were getting a lot of traction. And many of those podcasts that rose up around that time did see sponsorships with brands like Casper Mattress or health and wellness brands, things like that. And so it was always very interesting to me how that shift happened. And also those podcasts had a much broader audience. So as we're kind of considering, is a sponsor going to be right for you? I want you to think of a few things first. One, do you really want a sponsor to finance the podcast? And if so, is that sponsor fully aligned with your audience and your values? This is really important, especially as we're going into a time where people are really basing a lot of their collaborations and connection on values. And so I think it's really important to consider that as we're going forward and as you're kind of laying the groundwork of deciding, is a sponsor right for you? So know your audience. What are their needs? Who are those sponsors that are going to make the most sense for them? Going back to the reason why I said that 5,000 downloads was okay is if you are talking specifically to midlife women about menopause and you're getting 5,000 downloads per month, a menopause wellness brand would be very excited to get into the ear of 5,000 monthly listeners over another bigger podcast where they wouldn't really see that great of results. So that's where I say, like, it really just depends on your audience, whether you're going to be able to reach out to a brand that's really niche, or if you have a broader audience, you're going to need a lot more downloads to justify them wanting to work with you, especially as like a bigger brand. So keep that in mind. What are their demographics? What are their interests? Who is that audience that you're really even talking to? What are those metrics that a sponsor is going to be interested in? They're going to want to know your social engagement. They're going to want to know your website traffic, your podcast website traffic, the downloads you're getting, the YouTube views you're getting. You're going to want to make sure that you have all of this information compiled in one place for them. And then you're going to want to create a media kit. This is showcasing your podcast, your audience, and what that pricing level looks like. So for our clients, we usually have 3 variations because a lot of these are businesses. The first one is a full sponsorship package. So they would want the host to just read the ad for them. The second one is a sponsorship and collaboration one, where the host would interview the founder of the business, would maybe interview some high-level people in the business, would get really into why people should buy from this company. And then the final one is a guest spot that the person can buy where they would be able to be featured on the podcast, but they're paying to be there rather than the host reaching out to them and asking them to be there. So those are some different variations of the sponsorship packages that we tend to gear our clients towards, but there are a lot of different ones that you can pick from, a lot of different resources out there. But identify first, what are those brands that you would want to work with? Are there affiliate programs that you can maybe use instead of having a host-read ad that could deter your audience from listening fully to the episode? What are maybe some podcast networks? We had an episode on podcast networks. We'll make sure we link that into the description and the show notes. That is something that you can consider as you're looking through, all right, I'm doing all this work, I'm getting lots of downloads, and I want to be able to maximize this as best I can. That's a great way to do that. If you are a smaller brand, though, or a smaller podcast with fewer downloads, then you're going to want to directly reach out to these brands to collaborate with them or to request them to sponsor your show. The next step is to create a compelling pitch. Really highlight what it is about your audience, your perspective, the content that you're talking about. What is it that stands apart from others in your industry? And then make sure that you're tailoring that pitch based on that person that you're pitching. Don't just blanket pitch people. Same with podcast pitching, right? Like you get, I'm sure, tons of very terrible podcast pitches as a podcast host. I know that I do, and it is very frustrating. So make sure that any sponsorship pitch that you send is clear. It is to the point. It gives the person exactly what they need to know up front for them to make a very easy decision on whether they want to work with you or not. Also, offer flexible packages like the 3 that I mentioned. It's really important that you have some variety for people to pick from, and that way they can self-select out rather than just giving them one option that is maybe too much of a budget for them. And that way they have some wiggle room to be able to go back to whoever needs to approve it, or to be able to say, yes, that's exactly what we want. Next is the negotiation. So you're going to need to negotiate. I recommend looking at industry standards. I think those are going to change over the next year, so I don't want to state what they are now. Please go check those out. What are the expectations for sponsorship rates? What are people currently getting paid for their sponsorships? If you have a more niche audience, you should be able to charge more for your time, for your expertise, for that audience. That sponsor is buying your space, right? They're buying space to talk to your audience. And it is so important that you protect that audience with everything that you have within you. Otherwise, they will not feel like you care about them, that you only care about getting the money in. And that is never a way that you want your podcast listeners to feel. So make sure that you are getting paid accordingly and also that it makes sense for your audience. You need a written agreement. You're going to need a contract. I'm not a lawyer at all. Make sure that you read through any agreement that is presented. And then finally, you're going to deliver on your promise. This might look like a high quality pre-roll ad, mid-roll ad, post-roll ad. It might be a host read ad. It might be an ad read by someone else that's in their company. You're also going to want to provide the sponsor with all of the performance that your podcast episodes are doing, making sure that they're seeing the impact of their investment. And you want to make sure that's a two-way street. I've seen it where the sponsor kind of controls all of the links. They are the only ones seeing the links. They're the only ones seeing how much money they're making. You want to make sure that there's a lot of clear visibility between the two brands, between you and the sponsor, that there is a clear line of what information is available to both of you. And that way, one person doesn't feel slighted or doesn't feel like it's not worth it to continue with the sponsorship if it's really working. So this is a great way to build long-term relationships, create a positive relationship with the sponsors. They may want to work with you in the future, or they may have other friends or businesses that they can refer back to you. I hope this was helpful. This was definitely very high level. I did not get into a lot of the nitty gritty of things that you could do for sponsors, but I also don't like the sponsorship approach. So it's definitely a choice. It's not one that I recommend if you have a business podcast or if you use your podcast to generate leads, but I know that times are rough sometimes and you might want to be looking into sponsorships. So here is all of the information that I have on the topic to be able to allow you to make an educated decision on if you want to move forward. And then what are some steps that you can do to move forward with a sponsorship. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Until next time, happy podcasting.